This is Internet Marketing.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Marketing Podcast brought to you by SiteVisibility. I'm your host, Scott Colnut, and with me today is an ex-colleague of mine, a consultant of SiteVisibility's, an author, a SaaS software co-founder. I'm sure there are other things I'm missing there, Martin. It's Martin Hayman. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Scott. It's good to finally be on.
And good to catch up with you. Martin and I were just saying that we haven't spoken in a little while. Martin's worked as a consultant at SiteVisibility, for SiteVisibility for a while, but he's been off on many other ventures, and I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of them in today's podcast. So it's nice to just have a little bit of time to sit, catch up, talk about marketing, SEO, and the world over the last couple of years. Specifically, we're going to be breaking down today using SaaS software to surface SEO quick wins. So as I noted, Martin is a consultant, the founder of WildSprout, but also Martin is the co-founder of two organic search software tools. They are Twylu and RankCaddy, and we're going to be discussing the growth of those tools and the challenges and successes and the journey in building those tools. Martin, I gave a brief introduction to you there and talked a little bit about some of the things that you do. Is there anything more that you want to add?
Yeah, so I've been in the SEO world for about 13 years. Like you say, I'm an author of a book called The Organic Advantage, which was a number one bestseller in multiple categories on Amazon. I've been back and forth a little between in-house and agency over the years. And yeah, I went freelance about 5 years ago. And as I built a team of partners and freelancers around me, I transitioned that into an agency, I think about nearly 3 years ago, and that's when WildSprout was born. WildSprout's an online marketing agency whose main focus is e-commerce. So until 2020, that was me. And then COVID hit, and I lost a couple of really big clients. They were in industries that were really rocked by COVID. And I found myself, or so I thought, with a bit more time on my hands. And, 2020 was tough, but it did give me the opportunity to create Twylu and RankCaddy, which is something I've been wanting to do for ages. And yeah, like you say, Twylu and RankCaddy are things that have been built since then. Twylu is a tool that makes internal linking much, much easier. And RankCaddy is a rank tracker, which we're about to launch. And that has additional tools and actionable insights as well. And I've been loving working on the SaaS side of things. So, who knows what the next 5 years looks like.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So you mentioned there that it's something that you always wanted to do, which leads me into kind of where I wanted to start the podcast today and just catching up with you. We were last colleagues maybe 8 or 9 years ago. It was a long time now. But as I mentioned, you've been a consultant at SiteVisibility's through your WildSprout brand for a while. But I didn't really know when Twylu and RankCaddy came onto the horizon for you. So I'm really interested in that journey because I've spoken about it on the podcast before, that I meet a lot of people in marketing, particularly agency side marketing, and they get burnt by really how dynamic, how busy it is. And so it starts to become a goal to take some kind of business or livelihood into their own hands. And the dream almost is to build a SaaS product or some kind of passive income stream, something I've talked about very recently on the podcast. For you, what was the goal with Twylu and RankCaddy? And you mentioned about always having that goal. When did that goal start to come onto the horizon for you?
I think it was about scratching my own itch. So I think that's often the case with some new tools that are created. So, for example, with Twylu, for a long time, I was doing internal linking audits and recommendations manually, and I'd find myself just buried in spreadsheets. And it takes a long time, and it's probably why some people swerve it, to be honest, because it is time intensive. And I'd wanted to build something to automate the whole process and just make things easier. So yeah, I think, and a similar kind of thing with RankCaddy. I can go into reasons why we created that a bit more, but it was to scratch my own itch. It was kind of something that was missing. I found myself buried in spreadsheets with some of the things that RankCaddy does, and yeah, it was. I enjoy working with clients. I enjoy the agency side of things, But the SaaS products is something I've wanted to do for a long, long time. With the timing of COVID hitting, and it just seemed like the right time where I had a bit more free time where I could actually finally do these things.
Was Twylu your first attempt at a SaaS product?
It was, yeah. So Twylu was something I'd wanted to do for ages. I approached a guy called Dan Bianchini, who is a co-founder of an agency called Common Ground. He had been introduced to me a few years back by the awesome Kirsty Hulse, who I think you've had on the podcast. And he's got a similar background to me. He's got good technical SEO experience. He's been in the game about the same amount of time. And I started talking to him about the idea, and we just decided to do it together. And then I approached my friend, Matt Gain, who's an awesome developer. And I said, look, this is what we're looking at doing. Can you build this? Matt's great. And he was just like, yeah, of course I can. And yeah, Twylu was born then. And I had the idea for RankCaddy at the back of my mind for a long time as well. And I'd already started having conversations with Matt about building that. So that just kind of started happening after Twylu. But yeah, Twylu was absolutely, the first attempt.
So I'm already learning some lessons and figuring some things out here, Martin. So there are things that are eye-opening for me, and I think really good lessons for the audience and for me to take away. So the first is just about scratching the itch, which I think is really important just in marketing and any creative industry, is you identified something that you were spending time manually on. You obviously had this SaaS interest as well. And it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the first things I remember about you, because we only worked together briefly, maybe for about a year, but I remember you were really hot on link decks, I think was the tool at the time that we used as SiteVisibility. And you were probably the most experienced person using that in our company. So I have you in my mind associated with product or software, I think, for that reason. And so the first lesson really that I took from that is that even when you have that itch, when you're in agency side marketing or you're a consultant, you are often so busy that realistically it can take a lot of time before you even start to explore some of these ideas. So you've been in marketing a long time, and it was a long time before you started exploring Twylu as your first product. And then you mentioned that there was the pandemic that happened, and that gave you a little bit more free time to kind of launch and explore that first SaaS product. So that was interesting to me. Another thing I touched on there as I was talking is the identification of what you're spending time on manually and then whether you can automate it. There is a certain type of person that looks at, I think, marketing and life that way and thinks, oh my, I'm doing this thing over and over again. I've got to find a way to do this faster. And so I just think, if there's anyone listening out there and you're spending your time doing those things manually and thinking there's got to be a better way, I don't know if you agree with this, Martin, but the answer probably is yes, there probably is.
Especially when you're buried in spreadsheets, I think.
Yeah.
I think if you're finding yourself, buried for days in spreadsheets, there's probably an opportunity for a tool there.
And then the third thing, Martin, is that networking there. Not everyone is particularly well networked. And I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, but you're a particularly nice person. You're a good person. And that's something, one of the reasons that I wanted to, and I'm enjoying having the conversation with you, and I wanted you on the podcast and was willing to have you on the podcast, is I know how much of a good person you are, and kind of your openness, transparency, humility is probably the word that comes to mind. And so, you just mentioned two people there that were maybe critical in the role of the development of your first product, Kirsty Hulse, and I can't remember Matt. What was the surname? Sorry.
Matt Gain. So Kirsty introduced me to Dan. And Matt's been a friend for a long time.
So I just wanted to point out some of those key lessons first before we go into talk a little bit more about Twylu. I think we spoke there a little bit about where the idea came from, and I assume here, and do correct me if I'm wrong, that again, you noticed the importance of internal linking for organic search. You mentioned you were doing things manually, I assume in something like Excel or Google Sheets at the time. Yeah,
Excel.
And then you thought there's got to be a better way, and that's where you started the idea for the product. So when you have this idea, where did you start? So are you starting to sketch things down? Do you start researching for other products and whether they exist? What's kind of your starting point?
I sort of had a whole plan for Twylu, but there were a lot of missing pieces. And So I did have sketches down. I've actually done this with Twylu and RankCaddy, kind of A3 sheets of paper, sketches of how things can look and how it can work. And I'm not a designer by any means. I'm not very good at art. So you'd laugh if you saw these things, but it was enough for Matt to kind of, get going and understand what we wanted doing. But although I did have a plan in place, especially for Twylu, I think there were pieces missing. And I think this is where it's been great working with Dan on this, because we've bounced a lot of ideas back and forth. And I think the tool is much better because of it. For example, I was actually originally thinking of basing recommendations on site search. Anyone who saw my Brighton SEO talk in the autumn will know I'm not really a fan of site search anymore for this kind of thing. And I think it's a good starting point if you just want to pick up some quick recommendations, but it is really unreliable and you start to get irrelevant results. You start to get results where the term's only mentioned in the main nav. And then even if you start using things like the in-text operator, you still see those results. And then Dan suggested using Search Console data, and we started bouncing ideas around that. And we eventually decided, why let Google recommend the pages for internal links when we can just do it? We want to be recommending these pages. The way it works now is if you want to optimize a particular page, you can go to the area in Twylu where you optimize that page. The Search Console data is pulled in to pull in the top terms related to that page. And then we're not a regular crawler. We kind of process all the HTML as well. So what Twylu will then do is go off to the rest of the site, find mentions of those terms. It will then look for pages that mention those terms but don't yet link to this page, and it will surface those as opportunities. And it will show the kind of sentence or paragraph with that opportunity in as well, so you can see the context around it to see if it is actually a good opportunity or not. And the other thing you can do is also use manual terms. And, you can use this in really creative ways, but it's really good for like topical relevance as well. So let's say, for example, you have a site that has a CrossFit category where you can put CrossFit into that manual area and it will do the same thing. It will go off to the rest of the site. It will look for all the pages that mention CrossFit. And if they're not linking to this page that you're optimizing, it will then surface those as opportunities. And then you can, add those as tasks and assign them to yourself or other team members. That's the way the main part of it works. And then it's evolved since then. We've come up with new ideas based on customer feedback as well. And we've added new features to help find, internal linking issues, conflict culprits, and, some other stuff as well.
When you had the A3 sheets out and you started to sketch, and just in the early stages of development, what were some of the biggest personal challenges for you? So you've used the phrases you were talking, maybe that you're not a developer. But just knowing you, I consider you more technical, particularly on the SEO front, but you've mentioned that you're not a developer. So was that a challenge for you?
A little bit, in that, obviously Matt he's an awesome developer, but he was relying on us for how this is going to work. I think with tools like this, you have to test the hell out of it. And, although we have so many websites are built and configured differently, so even now, every now and again, we're just going to get a weird bug that might crop up. That's been a bit of a challenge. And, I think we've got a lot of these ironed out now. But I'll give you an example. A while back, we had a customer saying their crawl was taking ages. So we started digging into the logs and everything. And we were like, hold on, they're crawling the BBC. They weren't crawling the BBC. They were actually crawling a different, well-known brand, but a much, much smaller site. And we couldn't figure out why they were crawling the BBC. And what had happened is, for some odd reason, this site had a page with a canonical tag pointing to the BBC homepage. Now, we hadn't really planned for this, so it sent Twylu down a rabbit hole and it started trying to crawl the whole BBC site. We ironed that out. We fixed it. It now ignores external canonicals, including subdomains. But every now and again, weird little things like this will crop up, and I think that's going to happen. That's been one challenge between the kind of SEO and the development crossover. Honestly, for me, one of the biggest challenges has just been life since COVID. So back in March 2020. Around the time I wanted to start building this, that was around the time I lost those couple of big clients and, really wanted to do this, then got hit by COVID. My wife and I both did. And, I've normally got pretty solid immune system, but even knocked me for six for a couple of weeks. I was in bed for about a week and a half. And even after that, so I think like a week or two after I'd recovered, I went into the garden and I think it was a 12-minute kettlebell workout. And it took me 15 minutes to get my breath back.
Wow.
So, I still wasn't right for a while. And I'm fine now. I feel great now. But my wife is still suffering. So she's one of these unfortunate long COVID crew. And she's been really struggling since March 2020. She still can't even go for a walk. And for about 4 months of 2020, she was bedbound. So that kind of flipped life upside down for us. So whereas I thought I was suddenly going to have quite a bit of free time to work on these tools and everything like that, suddenly I found myself getting up early in the morning, doing a bit of work, then homeschooling, and then doing a little bit of work in the afternoon. And then I think for a good 4 or 5 months, I was consistently working till 2, 3 a.m. The problem with that is, I think we all know the importance of sleep. On 2 occasions, I made myself physically sick and put myself in bed for a day. So that wasn't working out. So I think one of the biggest challenges has been trying to just get that new routine. And, things are much better now. I still have to do a lot of those things. So still, doing the school runs, and then I work in the mornings, then I do the school run again. And then I'm with the kids for the afternoon. And then, after dinner and putting them to bed, then I crack on with work. But I try to go to bed when it's still nighttime now and not when it's, 2, 3 a.m. But that kind of wiped out the idea of suddenly having a lot of free time. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. But got through it, and the routine is much better now. But I'm sure, I know for a fact I'm not the only one who's struggled since that kind of early 2020 time.
Have all of those experiences changed your either attitude or goals towards what you want to do in marketing and in work?
I don't know if that has. It's made me realize that being flexible is kind of an absolute must for me. But I think aside from the difficulties over those, nearly 2 years, I think just working on the SaaS stuff has really perked my interest even more on that side of things. So that's, I've really enjoyed working on those tools. And, I do still enjoy working on the agency side of things and with clients, but I probably, if I'm honest, see myself moving away from that one day, and maybe I'll just work with a few select clients.
Well, that was my thinking, is that I think that society and a change and emphasis on flexible working when you're in marketing and you're either your agency side consultant or in-house, it's a busy role. It's kind of non-stop. You can never turn it off. And I assume with the SaaS product, one of the attractions, aside from the actual interest in marketing, is the passive income stream. And that's not to dismiss SaaS owners. It's a lot of hard work. And I'm sure you think about it a lot. But I'm also sure that the reliability or the flexibility that it gives your life being a SaaS owner, essentially it's a more flexible life than perhaps an in-house or agency side marketing role. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, when you're working in-house or at an agency, it is difficult because of everything that's going on. With the busy agency life, it's, and everything else that's going on, it's really hard to put that time aside, because it isn't just something you can do, an hour a day or something. It's time intensive. And I think if the whole COVID situation and losing a couple of clients hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have done these. So it needs time, but it needs time and flexibility. So it is hard to do it. When you're in-house or agency side.
So a couple of other questions about Twylu and growing Twylu in this period. So you talked about the beginning, you talked about the development, maybe either challenge or working with the developer and how that worked, and maybe some of the unexpected challenges along the way. I'm interested in the practical part of, well, actually, you talked about it. You were talking about testing, and that's always really interesting to me. So with Twylu, you maybe had to rely on testers to use the tool to give you feedback so you knew about the interface and experience. But in terms of the collection of data, I assume you could crawl any site that you wanted to see how it worked. How long were you testing Twylu before you eventually launched it public?
Well, a while, I guess. So I'd probably say, I mean, the good thing about me and Dan working on this is it's kind of what we do. It's one of the reasons we wanted it is because it's something we've been struggling with and found really time intensive. And like I said, we'd be buried in spreadsheets. So it's something we wanted to use. So it was easy for us to just test it ourselves for a while. So, I'd say for a good few months, we were probably testing it. And then we started picking up just a few select beta testers because we wanted to try some different site types. Because this can be used on any site. So we wanted to try it on Magento, on Shopify,
How did you find the beta testers, Martin? Were they friends and family, or were they just people out in the wild?
Mainly people we have worked with. Yeah. So we found a few kind of ex-colleagues in the right industry and that we knew had some varying site types as well. And just selected a few people. And just got them to test it as much as possible.
And then, my original question was, how long was it from the testing through to launch? Can you remember that period?
I think that was probably another few months. Yeah. So we obviously started building early last year, but we didn't launch till end of last year, beginning of this year, as in a proper launch. So we had just a couple of small beta phases, and then launched it properly then.
I guess moving on to where we're at today. So on the topic of SEO Quick Wins, and essentially you use this tool to make the process of internal linking and the suggestions around internal linking more efficient to improve organic search performance. So this is the part where you feel free to self-promote and a little bit more if you want to, and blow your own trumpet, because I'm interested to know, have you got maybe one or two examples of how Twylu has helped someone achieve that, how it's helped identify quick wins, maybe for internal linking, and then maybe the results from that?
Yeah, so for me personally, yes. I mean, it's still quite early days. So I think it's felt quite early to start tapping up customers for case studies of their clients and things like that. But we probably should start talking to them soon. But even personally, like I use it myself, Dan uses it. I've recently seen some great results on a couple of e-commerce sites I'm working with where internal linking has been a big focus. But, we know internal linking has an impact, right? And I think there's a ton of case studies out there to show why you shouldn't be skipping this. And I think a lot of people still do.
And that was a really interesting thought coming into this, is that, and I agree with the comment there. And I was thinking, well, why do people skip it? And I think the reason is pretty much taking the conversation full circle about Twylu. It's because I've noticed for me, it can be a real pain in the arse to do it manually, even semi-automated. If you're smart enough with Excel, it's still time consuming. And you sometimes still debate the trade-off of the time investment versus the result. Whereas it's one of those things that you would definitely do more often if you know you could make it more efficient, which has essentially been your goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a little mix of some people just not understanding what the next steps are and what they need to do. And even the people who do know what they need to do in Excel and they've got some good templates created where it does save a little bit of time, it is still time intensive. There's still a lot of cross-referencing and manual work. And it's just one of those things where, sometimes the time intensive stuff like that and the not so easy stuff to do is often skipped. So, but we know how important it is. People are, especially recently, I think people have been banging on about how important internal linking is. Even people at Google talk about how important internal linking is. But, some people are still swerving the time intensive work.
So for our listeners at this point, we're going to link to Twylu in the show notes so you can check that out and obviously contact Martin and explore the tool yourself. But we'll probably move on from the Twylu part of the conversation now and move into, I know, a more recent development in RankCaddy. But one final question just on Twylu for anyone that is interested in that, wants to go check it out. Maybe what's on the horizon for you at this point? You said you still feel very early on in your journey. What are your goals maybe over the next year or so for that?
I think we just want to continue. We've got a backlog of ideas where we want to, some of them are small and just build upon what's already there because we want to make it as useful as possible. And some of them are bigger ideas that will just bring kind of new features and things like that. But initially we want to work on improving performance and things like that so we can get crawls running a bit quicker. But we want to make it as quick, as seamless, and as easy as possible for people to use. So I think one of the next things we need to do is just make the whole journey a bit easier. So we're going to start adding some more kind of visual tool tips and things like that, just so people know exactly where to go and what to do. We've got quite a hefty backlog of ideas and things we'd like to implement. So there's definitely more coming.
Excellent. And leading me into RankCaddy, and I say it slowly because coming into the podcast, I was even thinking about it before bed last night. For some reason, I've got it in my mind as Rank Daddy, and I know that's really, really funny, and it's totally weird, and so I've got to be really careful to just make sure I use the right
rebrand.
Yeah. So with RankCaddy, I'm just interested to know a very similar kind of starting point as with Twylu. When did that idea start to come to fruition? What drove you to kind of come up with that idea? Talk me through that.
Yeah, so I mean, it was around the same time as the Twylu idea. I'd been talking to Matt anyway about building a rank tracker, and it's not an obvious idea. It's quite a competitive space.
Yeah, I've got a note in front of me to say that it's probably one of the most competitive spaces you could enter. That's what I was most surprised by.
But again, it was about scratching my own itch, and it was about frustrations I had. So I didn't want to just build a rank tracker because, a lot of them do different things, but some of them are just rank trackers. So I wanted to build something that aligned that with really actionable insights, but that was also affordable. And this, nothing against other products, because most of them do things differently and they have, different features. But honestly, I've always found rank tracking expensive.
Yep.
And, I have a client in the US they were using a rank tracker. I won't say who. Mm-hmm. It isn't cheap. And I said to them one day, I said, look, what do you think of the rank tracker you're using? And they said, crap. They said, we don't get anything from it. We have no idea what to look for. We don't really get any insights from it. It's just we just get lost in there. So we don't even check it now. We've stopped checking it. I wanted to create something that was not only affordable, but that also had additional tools that were really actionable and easy to use. So, we built RankCaddy. We're just in an early beta phase with that at the moment, but hopefully launching that to everyone really soon. Although I suppose for some listeners, it would have launched ages ago. Who knows?
So I am interested. That one, RankCaddy, sounds a little bit more complicated in my mind to execute than Twylu. Am I right in that assumption? And maybe could you talk me through, maybe some of the challenges in building that, and just talk through that process about how you've started to build the product.
One of the challenges is it could go in so many directions, and what we don't want to do, we don't want to be a tool that does everything. We've come across tools that have fallen into that trap before. It's not what this is about. So if I start from the beginning, initially it was just broken into two parts, and that was the rank tracker and the data dive. And again, I had one of my really crappy diagrams on an A3 sheet of paper that looked horrendous, but it was all there. I knew exactly what I wanted it to do. And with the rank tracker, I wanted it to be as useful as possible. So rather than just being a rank tracker, what quick wins can we show you? And what can you actually do with this info? And just make all the filtering and everything just as simple as possible. Show conflict detection, find opportunities. Just make it as useful as possible. And then for clients, I was often blending Search Console and GA data. So, when you're in Search Console, it's very hard to align stuff because you're always clicking back and forth between pages and queries. Mm-hmm. And even when you bring that data into analytics, it's very hard to combine the data. So it was one of those things, again, where for clients, I was pulling everything into spreadsheets and doing lookups and aligning everything. And it was really time intensive, but it was a way to find some insights and opportunities. So that's why I wanted to do the data dive area. And that was just the starting point of that. So we blended that data, starting point, and then started building loads of quick win actions off of that using filtering. And we also pull in other things like on-demand, on-page optimization details via page scrapes and things like that. So we're trying to make everything as easy as possible. And yes, sometimes it does require digging around the data. I think that's going to be the case for any tools where you're looking for insights and you want to get the most from it. But we're trying to make everything we can just a one-button click. opportunity finder. So, we want to look for this opportunity, click, here they all are. And then we've expanded from there to build things like really flexible alerts, and there's more coming too. But we have got to be careful not to fall into the trap of let's do everything, because we're not trying to be the next Ahrefs. We're not a crawler. We just an actionable tool, and we want to surface low hanging fruit, quick win opportunities, and just things that people can actually put into practice.
I think the thing that's going through my mind, and one of the challenges that I'm trying to imagine myself in your shoes, and one of the challenges that I think would come to mind for me is knowing from a marketing perspective who to market with that product. Because the way it always feels to me is that the greater the range of the product features, sometimes that lends itself to more corporate companies. And it sounds more like RankCaddy is aimed towards kind of SMEs or medium-sized businesses. How fair is that? Is that accurate at all? Do you have to consider that?
It's probably that, and even below that kind of scale as well. So kind of freelancer level. So I'd say I speak to people who are freelancers or very small agencies, and they say, "Oh, I can't afford Ahrefs. I don't want to use that." I think Ahrefs is an awesome tool. I use it all the time for keyword research. But I speak to some people who don't use certain rank trackers because it's not really within their budget. They don't use tools like that because it's not within their budget. I wanted to keep this affordable. Basically, all the kind of actionable stuff around it is just value added on top. People are just paying for the rank tracker, and then anything else we build on this most likely will just be free. We won't be adding costs to this. So, but I'd say everyone from small agencies to freelancers and small businesses could use it. I'd probably say it's that kind of range, because we're not, a lot of tools have got their market nailed. People like Pi Data Metrics, they're more the enterprise end of the market. We're more the opposite end of the market. So we're an affordable option for those hand-on SEOs who really want to get implementing, especially with the quick wins.
That's really interesting to me as well, because I think it's kind of build what you know and what you need. And you read about that and you hear about that a lot in marketing and business. It's some of the best business ideas come from, like you've just discussed, a need or wanting to scratch an itch or something that you've seen yourself. And so it sounds like you're building things that you'd actually use yourself as a marketing consultant.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to build something I wouldn't use myself. So I'm kind of, like I said earlier, scratching my own itch. I'm building things that I would just love to be out there. So why not do it myself?
Yeah, and ranking tools are an interesting one, because I agree with you. Just the principle of what you've said is that it's funny, out of all of the ranking tools that I've used, and I've pretty much used all of the major ones, none of them have completely satisfied me and my needs. So even in a saturated market, I guess some people I talked about it being a competitive market, and that would naturally, for me, maybe make me inclined to avoid the market. But it doesn't necessarily mean that in competitive markets, there aren't still opportunities for improvement. So that's something I guess I admire in what you're doing there. It's kind of a commitment to do something in quite a challenging or competitive space. So one aspect I'm really interested in is talking about competition there and the competitive spaces is research. And so we talk about it in marketing a lot, just from a creative standpoint, is that sometimes you don't want to do too much competitor research because you don't just want to be doing what other people are doing, and you don't want that to stunt your creativity. But when you're building SaaS products, do you kind of have a scrapbook open of ideas and features and functionality from other tools that already exist? Or do you try to avoid that to mold the product into exactly what you want it to be?
I guess not so much in terms of features. So especially for RankCaddy, I did want to be aware of what other products were out there. Yeah. So there wasn't too much crossover, and have a little look at the features just to make sure that there wasn't something just doing exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
But aside from that, that wasn't with a view to, let's do this, let's do what they're doing and what they're doing. We knew what we wanted to do. So it was more just to kind of make sure that there was actually an opportunity there, that we could do this. We could do it at an affordable rate that people would be interested in. And then, it's more been, let's just build what we want to build. And, we know what features we want. And we're also taking feedback from these early beta testers as well, which has been really useful. And just trying to get an idea of what are those day-long spreadsheet type tasks that we can actually build into this, and it makes sense for a tool like this.
What's the future like? What's the next year for you like? So you mentioned you're still in beta. When are you looking to launch, and what are some of the next steps that are ahead for you?
We've got a few early beta testers that we're just getting feedback from. We're kind of there with the initial phase now. We're just tweaking a few bits with the look and feel. But I think all in all, we're pretty much there. So I think, but I don't just want to go ahead with a full launch. So I think the next step is a slightly larger beta test. So we'll probably get some more people on board for that. And then I think maybe a couple of months on from that, I think once we're happy that, we've ironed out any bugs or anything like that, and we've made things as useful as possible and as easy to use as possible, then I think we'll go full steam ahead and launch that.
And again, RankCaddy and all the details for where to find out more about that or connect with Martin on that, whether you want to access the product, maybe if there's beta tester opportunities, I'll add those to the show notes later. I'm going to move on to just outside of your own products now. So going back to the topic of surfacing marketing ideas using SaaS products and specifically in SEO and SEO Quick Wins. So my first point before we get into some of the quick wins was just building it into a routine. I think that for me is something that I've seen in my peers, in my colleagues, and maybe for myself as one of the most difficult things. So it's the discipline of using software and building it into your routine so that you don't forget things. I'm just interested to know that someone that's obviously interested in quick wins, but also just has quite broad marketing and SEO experience. How do you do that? So how do you build the identification of quick wins into your routine?
So what we've done with RankCaddy, for example, is we built in those quick win opportunities, and then we allow you to add them as tasks. Right. We've done a similar sort of thing with Twylu as well. So people can start building a process around it. Even if you're just using raw data, you're not using software at all, you should really be scheduling this sort of work in early and then fairly regularly as well. So, for example, during an audit phase, if you're working with clients, the next step should be quick wins and low-hanging fruit. Yeah. And then as data updates and changes, which depending on the site, it may do quickly or a little bit slower, then you should be looking at that again and again and scheduling that time in. I think too many people get caught up sometimes in like the shiny things like core web vitals instead of focusing on the basics and the quick wins. And they often skip that because they think, something big's coming or let's work on this big thing. And, as we've seen with core web vitals, often it isn't as big a deal as people think it's going to be. But, some people who have spent a lot of time invested in that could have been working on basics and quick wins that would have got them decent results in the meantime.
So it's kind of like sacrificing the fundamentals because of shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then speaking more broadly about SEO quick wins and maybe some of the software that you've used, maybe fire away. What are some of the things that you're using in the quick wins you like to identify most and you think have the biggest impact? Maybe talk me through some of those.
I've jotted down a list of 9 that I can give you if
Thank you so
want
much.
me to run through those.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I'm really interested to see kind of the tools you use, the things you identify, the things you look for.
Yeah, so the first one I've got here is, you might not necessarily class it as a quick win, but I did want to start with this because I think it's really important. I just mentioned it, and it's something that people skip a lot, and that is just do the basics. So things like title tags, header tags, content, internal linking, and so on. Like I said, some people are so focused on the next buzzword that, they often neglect the basics. So, when was the last time you just ran a thorough audit? And, there's going to be a lot of quick wins in there. So I think people should just initially, if they're not already, just go back to basics. And then number 2 is low-hanging fruit. Again, it may seem obvious, but some people seem unsure what to do with them. So some people are aware that, they might be looking at all of their terms are in position 4 to 20. I like to look at 4 to 30. I like to broaden it out a little bit. But, with those, you can start looking at improving on page optimization. Again, you can improve internal linking. You can improve the content. But when it comes to content, be honest. Is this content great compared to what's already on page 1? And, if not, make it great. Number 3 is update old content. And, we're looking at older evergreen content here. So keep it up to date, improve it, especially if it's been dipping off. One tool I love for this kind of thing, and also the content I was talking about in the last point, is Surfer. That's surferseo.com. And what Surfer does is it pulls in data from Google's NLP API. It then also scrapes the ranking results for a term, and it blends all of that data together. And it then gives you a content editor and shows you things like, how roughly in what range should your content be lengthwise? Right. What sort of terms should you be mentioning? What topics should you be talking about? What should you be using as potentially subheadings and so on? And, even if you're just using that as a guide, sometimes that can give writers a really good guide on, the things they should be talking about, the topics they should be covering, things they should be mentioning that Google might expect to be in a page ranking for X. So I get all my writers to use Surfer. So that's if you haven't seen that already, that's a great tool to check out. Number 4 is trim the fat. Do you have waste pages that drive no traffic, maybe over the last 3-6 months? And there's always an opportunity, I think, to remove or update and improve old content. And it depends on whether there's an opportunity, whether it's outdated and so on. But I think the less waste you have on a site, the better. And I've seen this time and time again with clients where they have loads of content that's 5 years old and it's about something that happened back then. It's completely irrelevant now. And, they're kind of wary about deleting anything.
Yeah, that's
interesting. That hasn't driven any traffic for years.
Well, that's just one quick question I was going to ask you there. So it's interesting you touched on that, because it's something I hear about and face a lot too. And I think there's maybe like a vanity attachment to things that have previously written. People in marketing maybe don't like to see content where time or money has been spent in the past to then sacrifice it. I'm assuming that, but because you've brought it up, you face that question, you face that argument sometimes. How do you end up convincing someone to remove some of the content they've created previously?
I've absolutely come across that. So sometimes you do get people saying, "Oh, but I wrote that. I spent ages on that."
Yeah.
Or, I'm a bit worried about removing anything, because we don't want to see any dips in traffic. And normally it just comes down. Sometimes it's a bit more of a challenge. Some people are fairly accepting quickly, but normally I think you can prove a lot of things and convince people, often with data.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those things. So if you can show people, look, this hasn't driven any traffic for 2 years, it's absolutely no good to you whatsoever, it's poor quality, doesn't drive any impressions, it's doing you no good whatsoever, it's irrelevant, even if someone landed here, it's no use to them whatsoever. I think if you can show everything with that kind of data and reasoning, then I think it's fairly easy to convince them. But still, there are a lot of people that just have a lot of waste on their site, and they do sometimes take a bit too long to get rid of it. And it can help getting rid of this sort of thing. If we've got search engines crawling content on a regular basis that's more important rather than all this waste, then yes, it absolutely helps. So I think the more you can trim the fat, the better. So number 5 is stealing featured snippets. And there's a few tools that can help find these opportunities. So, you can do some filtering in the likes of Ahrefs again, with this sort of thing. We're about to make this just a one-button click in RankCaddy to show these opportunities. So again, it's back to that. Just try and make as much as possible, just one-button click. And what you're looking for here is keywords where you're already on page 1. There's a featured snippet, but you don't have that snippet. Yeah. And it's then a case of tweaking your content and trying to take that spot. And there's plenty of guides out there online of how to do this, but you need to find those opportunities first. Number 6 is look for cannibalization issues or conflict issues, as some people might term it. So, with this, do you have pages competing for the same terms and, struggling to rank as a result? And when you find these, there's different reasons for this, but one page might not be needed at all. So you might be able to combine and or redirect one of those. Mm-hmm. One page might be needed, but it doesn't need to be indexed. So you might be able to use canonical tags. Or if both pages are in fact different, which is often the case, then you might be able to update the content on both of those, add internal links with keyword anchors. And there's various different tweaks you can do to then start driving that relevance towards one of those pages, the correct page. And this sort of stuff can take time, getting around the conflict issues, but it does help. Anyone who saw me speak in the autumn at Brighton SEO, I had an example on one of my slides of how much this can help. Really can make a big difference. Number 7 is use Search Console data. So with this, you can simply just have a look at what terms are driving impressions, and this might surface new opportunities to amend or expand on existing content, and maybe use some of those terms that are showing in the process as well. And you might be able to potentially drive more long-tail traffic or just organic traffic in general using that.
Before you go on to number 8, I'm just interested for number 7. Are there any tools that you found that can speed up that process of for, I guess, the analysis of Google Search Console data when it comes to keywords?
I'm not saying there aren't, because I'm sure there are some out there, but that is one of the things I wanted to do with RankCaddy, because it's not easy to, if you start doing exports and blending this data, it's not easy to do. It can be time intensive. It's sometimes hard to find the same kind of opportunities. It's a bit of a pain. So again, it's one of those things that I just wanted to make as simple as possible by blending that data. Because like I said before, I was doing all this sort of stuff in spreadsheets.
Yeah. There's one tool for the listeners that comes to mind for me that I've used before that I quite like, which is ClickFlow. And that's from Eric Sue. And it takes Google Search Console data and allows you to, it's really test different titles and description, but it's a faster way to identify pages with high impressions, low click-throughs, or keywords with the same thing. So, please carry on, but I just thought I'd note that.
Cool. So number 8 is low click-through rate pages. And that is looking for things like, there's a few variations you can use here. So things like pages with high impressions but low click-through rate. Or maybe they're ranking, average page 1, but again, low click-through rate. So they're on page 1, but low click-through rate. So why have they got low click-through rates? And you could improve things like title tags, meta descriptions, check the correct page is ranking. So are there conflict issues? And if it is the right page ranking, you could also look for cert features you can still potentially. And are you using the right terms when optimizing as well? And like I said, you can find these sort of things in Search Console, but you don't get the pages and terms aligned in one view. So, it's one of the reasons I wanted to do that in RankCaddy. And some of the other variations you can look at are things like high converting, high clicks. So, there might be an opportunity to drive more revenue here. We already know they're getting decent clicks. They're converting. Can we drive more here? Then there's high converting, low clicks. And again, it's then asking, well, why have they got low clicks? We know these convert. Can we drive more clicks and therefore more revenue to these pages? And then finally, low converting, high clicks. So why are these low converting? Is there maybe a CRO opportunity here to drive more conversions? And then 9, the final one, is internal linking. As we've discussed, it's one of those things that's often overlooked, but we know it's so important. So look to improve internal linking for especially low-hanging fruit pages. But it's also a good idea just to improve the internal linking overall, especially for important pages like e-commerce categories or something like that. And also review the nav structure as well, because even things like that can make a big difference. And one final little tip here, which so many people just skip this, but it's such a time saver and it's so important, is every time you add new content, look for internal pages to link to, but also look for old existing content to link from.
I think there is some great advice that you've shared there, and so many tools and services that I'm sure will help me and our listeners. So I appreciate you sharing them. But I guess just on that last point and around internal linking, going back to Twylu, RankCaddy, and yourself, Martin, and your book, can you let people know where they can find you if they want to reach out to you, if they want to try your tools and extend the conversation?
Yeah, sure. So, if anyone wants to give Twylu a try, they can find that on twylu.com. It's TWYLU.com. RankCaddy, as I mentioned earlier, depending on when you're listening to this, we are going to be looking for more beta testers to help us just do some final testing and improvements to that. So if you go to RankCaddy, CADDY.io and sign up there, then we'll be popping out an email soon and you might be able to get in on that still. And other than those, for everything else, you can just find me on Twitter, Martin Hayman on Twitter. I'm trying to get a bit more active on there. My DMs are open. So, if you have any questions, just pop me a message.
Slide in Martin's DMs, but in a nice way. All right, Martin, that's been really interesting to talk that through. Thanks for sharing that. Definitely all of the best for the tools, but more importantly, continued kind of love for your family. Hope everyone gets better, feels better, and definitely that you find some of the flexibility and livelihood that you're looking for through building these tools, because it's important both for the marketing community, but it sounds like also for yourself as well.
Thanks a lot, Scott. It's been great chatting to you.
Brilliant. All right, take care. This has been the Internet Marketing Podcast.